Welcome to the LB's The Lover of Books author chat. If this is your first time here, live or watching a recording, I'm so glad you found us and welcome. I've had the honor to interview over 65 debut to best-selling authors, and readers like you have helped me on my YouTube channel to amass over 17,000 hours watched. So I really appreciate you taking that time. I know authors love you taking that time and leaving a comment, and it just really helps the content fall into other readers' hands, or should I say their screen. But thank y'all so much. I want to introduce this Australian author. Emma Gray is a novelist, a feature writer, a photographer, and a professional speaker and accountability coach. I kind of need that sometimes. She's been writing fiction since she first fell for Anne of Green Gables at 14. Didn't we all? And as an author of YA novels, she wrote Unrequited Boy Band Meets Girl, Tilly McGuire and the Royal Wedding Mess, and a nonfiction title, I Don't Have Time, which was co-authored by Audrey Thomas, and a parenting memoir, Wits End Before Christmas, Confessions of a Working Mom. Along with her school friend, is it Aria winning composer,
Yes.
Sally Whitwell, co-wrote two musicals. I find this fascinating. I love it. Deadpan Anti-Fan and Fairy Tale Derail, based on her teen novels. Maybe her adult novels will land on the stage some point. She wrote her first adult novel, The Last Love Note, in the wake of her husband's death. It's a fictional tribute to their love, an attempt to articulate the magnitude of her loss and a life-affirming commitment to hope. I'm betting lots of you have already read it. If not, I'm sure you will soon. Emma lives just outside Canberra, where Megan also lives, and where her world centers on her two adult daughters, her young son, her loved stepchildren and step-grandchildren, writing, photography, no surprise, and endlessly chasing the Aurora Australis. So welcome so much, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you and to see some familiar faces here today as well.
Yeah, so this is your Monday midday, I believe.
Yeah.
Are you calling in from Australia?
Yes, we are here in the future. Everything seems okay.
It always is a little bit mind blowing to me, but I love that this time, at least right now, before all the time change happens, that this time works for everybody. All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to say congrats, and you got some news on both your books this week. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I had I'm only a couple of weeks home from my US book tour, which was amazing. And at the end of the tour, I found that both my books had hit the USA Today bestseller list, which was just so unexpected and so exciting, and I've got to thank all the US readers for supporting me during the trip and also just in general. It's been amazing.
Well, we are here to congratulate you, to celebrate you, and just think of this as your bestseller party. Like we're just so pumped. Um, Also, what can you tell us how you wrote this book? And what I mean by that is it has multiple perspectives. It has multiple timelines. Like, where did you begin, and how did that seed get planted?
Yes, well, it was funny. You know how you get the Facebook memories popping up? I've had quite a few recently in the last few days popping up from me about a year ago when I was tearing my hair out over writing this book. It was very complex. And I did go to a workshop once where they said never write dual perspectives and never write dual timelines. And it's just too hard. So I did both of those things, and it really was a challenge. Um, there was a time during the drafting of the first draft where I almost gave up on this book. I did call my agent in tears and say, I think it's too hard. I'm getting really overwhelmed and lost, and I don't know what I'm doing. And she's just such a comforting person, and she encouraged me to just keep going and said that I would find my way through it with the characters, and I'm glad I took her advice. Um, so I don't plot my books. So for something like this that had so many complex storylines and a little bit of a sort of thriller element to it as well, that was a bit hair-raising at times because I had to discover what was happening alongside the characters. And of course, to have had the main character with amnesia, it meant that she didn't know what she was doing either. So between the two of us, we were we were really on quite an adventure. Um, and when it came to writing the book that I'm writing now, my publisher at Zibby Books there said, maybe a little bit of plotting wouldn't go astray this time, because she's of course gone through this whole journey with the editing with me from Pictures of You. And I went to my local big stationery store and I bought a big whiteboard that sticks on the kitchen wall, and I sort of started the process of trying to plot this next book, and of course just use that as a shopping list really. In the end, I just, put up on the board when things run out in the fridge. I can't plot. So went back to the whole thing again with the next one, but trying to figure my way through a structural edit. So if anyone's got any tips on how to plot a novel, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, drop into her DM. She'd appreciate it. And so would her publisher. No, so you said how hard this is. What is it that, I mean, the amnesia, like, but what is it about the writing? Just keeping track with everything and making sure it matches up. Is that where the trouble
Yeah, it's
lies?
partly that. It's that that analogy of driving a car in thick fog and all you can see is the bit that the headlights are illuminating right in front of you and you
Mhm.
can't see where you're going. It feels like that. And it sort of is all playing out as if it's on a movie screen in front of me, and I'm just sort of desperately trying to capture the action and what the characters are saying. And often I'll be driving the car and they'll start talking. I can sort of hear them, and I'm desperate to get the action down. I have pulled off the road a few times and just sort of tried to record what I thought they were saying, and that kind of thing. It feels like you're kind of overtaken by some other force from somewhere else. It's a really bizarre experience, but so much fun, um, as long as it's going okay and you're not sort of, because you can push yourself into a part of the manuscript where you don't belong and the story's gone off the rails. And I think between both my The Last Love Note and Pictures of You, in the end, I deleted something like 70,000 words between the two books during the drafting process, during one of the many, many drafts that I wrote, and rewrote them. And I'm up to that now. It's sort of like going for a haircut in a way. Like I've got this manuscript, and there's just parts of it that are going to be taken out entirely, and that's going to help it to grow in other areas. So it's such a dynamic process. And not for all authors. There are a lot of authors that do plot very specifically before they start, and I simply wish I was one of them.
Well, okay, I have so many follow-up questions from what you just said. Okay, I'm picturing this vehicle, this fog coming in. How far can you see? I mean, the question is like, who was it? Anissa. Okay, you're not a plotter, but did you at least know the ending before? No, you know nothing. You know what's right in front of you.
Yeah, and it's sort of to the point where if I do know too far forward, and if I did work out the ending sort of early on in the process, it would kind of be like a spoiler for me as the writer. So I don't even want to know the ending, which is sort of self-sabotaging in a way, I suppose. But there is a point that I reach, and it's usually about three-quarters of the way in, where I can see the ending, and then it just feels like a downhill run. It just all slots into place and feels like, oh, I get it now.
It's your
This is where
sprint.
we've been going all this time. And that moment is exquisite, and I love that experience. But for example, with The Last Love Note, there was a secret that I raised fairly early on between her two love interests, so her husband who had passed away and her new love interest. And I said there was this secret, and I had no idea what it was. I just said there was a secret, and then spent the rest of the book trying to work that out. And I didn't figure it out. In fact, I'd thought it was the red herring answer all the way along, and then I didn't figure it out myself until she found out. It was almost at the same time. So I feel like I am almost in the same boat as the reader while I'm writing it,
Maybe
in
that's
that
why
I
I love it
don't know.
so much.
Yeah.
Do you see? I mean, because I'm almost picturing like a movie, a TV happening when this is going forward for you. Is that how you visualize as well?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I see it as a movie, and I've started thinking of books as either movies or TV series while I'm writing them. Just thinking of episodes almost or scenes. And the other night I was watching something and I realized that every time a particular subplot and these other characters came on, I would pick up my phone and start scrolling. And I thought, I have to remember that when I'm writing, that if there's ever any parts of this book where I just think this is where they'd pick up their phone, I need to ditch it completely or change it. And so I think it can be really interesting. And I don't know if that came about because I had the experience of converting one of my novel or two of the novels to stage musicals, and just learning a little bit about that process while I was doing that. But it is really helpful, I think, to be able to see it in that way.
Are there any rumblings for either one of these books being picked up for TV or movie?
There is actually a little rumbling,
Okay. We need to
which
hear
I'm
what's
not
the
allowed to
rumble.
say anything about yet, but there is a rumbling, yes.
Okay. And if the rumbling comes to fruition, is that something that you want to be a part of since you did do the writing into the musical? Can you see yourself turning it into turning yourself into a screenwriter basically?
Yeah, it's definitely high on my list of things that I want to learn how to do. And I did say the other day to one of the producers that I'm chatting with, that I would just love to be a fly on the wall in the writer's room and to learn as much as I can about screenwriting. I've also got this whole idea in my head for one of those Hallmark holiday movies, that we that you watch at the end of the year, and it's so predictable and all of that. I've got I actually that's the only thing I've ever plotted out in my life. I actually have a whole plot in my head for one of those. So I'd love to learn screenwriting next as a bit of a challenge.
Do you have some time to do this? Like what? No. All
Not
right.
at
So
the
you just
moment.
need to plot out some time, is what I'm hearing.
I do. I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Well, I hope that this does come to fruition. And I'm so excited because for me, it really, and I know you're keeping your reader in mind, and we can tell it because it does. It feels like movement, and I can just see, like, I can't wait to see that luminescent scene. Like, it's just
Yes. Yeah.
waiting
Beautiful.
to be, yeah, on the big screen. I cannot wait.
Yeah.
All right. So, getting back to the writing part. So you don't know what's happening until it happens, but do you have to make some important decisions right up front? Or do you just keep making them as they go? Or do they just keep
Yeah.
changing?
I think making them as they go, and also the more books that I write, I sort of learn the mistakes that I made last time, and I can hear my editor's voice now while I'm writing this next one. So I'm sort of stopping myself from making some of the same mistakes. But also then after the first draft, it then does become much more of a cerebral kind of activity where you're looking through and thinking, okay, well, does this make any sense? And where is it going off the rails? Where are the parts that are where the pacing is wrong? Is it too fast or is it too slow? Is there too much action or not enough action? And I think I'm really conscious these days of the fact that a lot of us have a fractured attention span, and whether on our phones or watching, binge watching a show on Netflix or whatever we're doing, there's so many competing things going on for our attention. And when I wrote my first teenage novel, I wrote it for my daughter who's now 24, but she was 14 at the time and hated reading but loved Harry Styles. And so I wrote a book about a boy band just to show her that reading could be fun by just zooming in on her fascination with him. And because she was a non-reader, I made sure that the chapters were short, that there were cliffhanger endings, that there wasn't too much narrative description. There was a lot of plot and action and dialogue. And I think that's probably carried over a little into my style as a writer with my adult books as well. And I don't think that's a bad thing because I think we are, um, it is hard to hold people's attention. And so I think there is a bit of an energy to the writing that probably came from writing for young adults first.
Absolutely, because I mean, YA readers have an advantage in that it immediately seeps into their adult writing as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you Mom of the Decade award. Like, how cool that you did that for your daughter, and it obviously paid off because she was so appreciative. I just love it. And we appreciate her jumping off. You jumping off into that reader world, writer world for us. So amazing. Were you
I
are
mean,
you
it was fun for me as well. It wasn't sort of, it's a
Yeah.
terrible thing to have to write this book. I fell in love with those characters, and then to put the musical on stage at her high school where she was a stage manager. It was just an amazing experience all around. All of that was happening the year after I lost my husband. So um, I often look back on that show and think just being able to surround myself with theatre kids and disco balls and glitter cannons and all the thrill of it is really the thing that saved me when I was at my lowest with grief. It was a strange, you don't sort of think, well, what I'll do now that I've lost someone is go and stage a musical. It's sort of counterintuitive, but it was already in train before he died, and I'm just so glad that we had that to keep us going.
What wonderful timing of all, I mean,
Mm,
for you to have that really is therapy. And
it was, yeah.
it really, and surrounding yourself with the arts, I think is some
Yeah.
of the best medicine anybody could
Mm,
ask for.
yeah,
All
I think
right, so
so
you
too.
have this YA background now. Is this how you're able to capture all that engulfing first craze of love? Because to me, that is one of the essential parts of this book and makes it
Yeah.
believable, is because we are right there. Like it takes you right back to those teenage years. How did you capture it?
Well, I think it was partly because my girls are now, they're in their early 20s now, and I've got a 14-year-old son. So I feel like I've been surrounded by all of this for a few years, and you can tap into it that way. But also, I've still got all my teenage diaries myself from the 80s. So it's
Ooh.
mortifying. Sometimes I threaten to put some of it up on Instagram, just for a laugh. But I'm still quite mortified by what I wrote. But I think being able to really go back into that feeling, and when one of my daughters broke up with her first boyfriend a few years ago, I remember her saying to me a few days afterwards, she said something like, I'm still thinking about him. When am I going to stop thinking about him? And I said, oh gosh, this is your first love. You're never going to stop thinking about him. I think ask any person to tell you about the first person they ever fell in love with, and it just all floods back in. We can remember so many details, and it just changes our brain chemistry, I think. And so once you start tapping back into it through being surrounded by teenagers or young people, and still having those diaries and having written for teenagers and then spent time with them doing the drama stuff, I think that's probably where it all came from.
Well, and I love that you brought up Twilight, like that she was imprinting, because that's really what your first love does. It imprints
Yeah.
on you and you're
Yes.
imprinting on them. And I loved that because it brought me right back to reading that novel, first of all. But it was
Yeah.
just a perfect reference. Like it was on point.
Yes, it's something stronger than falling in love, isn't it? It's
Yes.
this extra intensity, I think.
Well, and that intensity is really what started all the issues from the beginning. You
Yeah.
used a couple of terms, and I don't know how long these terms have been in use, but I feel like it hasn't been as long as we think. But love bombing and
Mm.
gaslighting, things like that. I don't remember that being in my
No, it wasn't
conversations. You
certainly
know,
not in the 80s. I
no,
remember
not in the '90s either.
I remember standing around the school lockers back in the 80s talking about first boyfriends being so obsessed with us and that kind of language. And it sort of felt like a compliment that they were so obsessed with you and that they wanted to spend all their time with you to the exclusion of other people. And we didn't have that language back then to know what that was. And then that continued on. I can tell you stories from every decade of my life where I've had very close friends or close colleagues in situations like that. I remember even before we had mobile phones and we'd be at work and you would pick up the phone of your colleague on their desk and it would be their partner calling again for the third or fourth time that day, wanting to know where they were and who they were with, and that kind of intense control. And now I'm 51, and quite a lot of my friends have either gone through a divorce or they've gone through the loss of their partner, and now they're re-entering the world of dating. And I'm seeing it again. I'm seeing this kind of pattern of behavior from prospective partners in their 50s. And I've then had conversations with a lot of readers who've said, I read pictures of you and I recognized my parents' marriage in the book. And, that they've been living a dynamic like that for 50 years. And so it's just a pandemic really of behavior.
It really opened my eyes as soon as I understood what love bombing was, because I hadn't identified it, been able to put my finger on it really until that term. And my teenage daughter, has used it, and I'm like, oh, it's in their
Yeah.
language now, though. Um, so I do think that's an important change to a lot of it. You did mention too that this is a mix between not just a romance, but also has a mystery element. Why did you want to was that to move that plot quickly through, or have you always wanted to write something with a mystery?
No, that was as much a surprise to me as anyone again. Um,
I love all
I don't
these
know how that
revelations.
happened. That's just what happened. I wish I could tell you that I thought of it. I mean, obviously, some part of me must have come up with it, but it just sort of that's what happened in the story. It just fell on the page. It sounds like you've been overtaken by some force from somewhere else and almost channeling the story from somewhere. I don't know how it happens, but I was fascinated by it. And that whole linguistics, the forensic linguistics storyline, actually, I ended up involving my sister in that because she did linguistics at university and ended up with the university medal in linguistics. And it's been a fascination of hers ever since. And she loves true crime. And so between her and my daughter, Hannah, who is doing criminology at university, she's just in her final year of her PhD now, and she's studying gendered violence. So between the two of them, that's where it came from. It was the influence of, again, the people that I'm surrounded by, um, and it was a great thing to be able to do a bit of a family collaboration on some of the story to have their advice. And then I don't know if you've all been following my book tour in the US, but my daughter Hannah came with me and we actually got to do an event together on stage at the Australian Embassy in Washington, DC, which was such a highlight of my entire life, such a highlight as a mum. I could have just sat there and listened to her talk really the whole time about her work. But that was lovely to have been able to collaborate on a story and then go over there and do an event together.
Well, I love that you've now expanded your genre a little bit, really a lot. And I'm wondering if that could be a path for you. Like, I kind of want her to now solve mysteries with linguistics. They're like me a takeoff for it, because I found all that so fascinating. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you to your sister. Just because as women, we do tend to be curious about true crime because we're all so susceptible, right? So, is there
Yeah.
any chance that you might?
Well, I mean, never say never. I don't know what's going to happen. I certainly loved writing it. Once I figured it all out and got through the angst of actually getting it on the page, I really did love doing that, and I loved the layering of all sorts of different sort of little clues along the way, which of course a lot of that you add in as you're editing. So once you've finally figured out what's happening, then you have to go back and help to seed little things as you go through to help the reader understand what's going on.
Now, you also mentioned dealing with Zibby Publishing, but you also have an Australian publisher. Is it different working with different countries' publishing and industry? How has that changed for you?
Yeah, I'm published by Penguin in Australia, and it was great because the editors from both publishing houses worked together when we were doing the editing of the book. So it's the same story being published in both markets, just different spelling and occasionally different terms. Although I've really argued to keep in a lot of the Australian quirky terms because I've had a lot of American readers come to me and Canadian readers and say, leave it in. We want to hear about the different, little quirks of language. Um, and for my next book, I've also got a UK publisher for the first time. So there's now three editors working together. And thankfully, they have agreed that they will meet together and discuss the manuscript and come up with a united front before they send me the document. Otherwise, can you imagine sitting there and trying to coordinate with three different lots of editing advice? It's a
No.
lot. But Zibby Books has been fantastic. They they only publish one title a month, so you do feel like you have got their full attention when the book is first released, and it's just been great in terms of meeting other. Well, I mean, I pretty much know every other author that Zibby is publishing, which is a beautiful situation to be in, and you don't get that necessarily in a much bigger publishing house.
What a great literary family. I think it's fantastic. And when you were talking about the editor being on your shoulder, I was hoping it wasn't two, but so it sounds like it's kind of a collective one voice that you're hearing. So that probably makes it a lot easier. Now we're going to go back to the romance side of it because I want to know about your infatuation, or do you have one with the Regency era romanticism? Because
Oh,
that
I mean,
really was a
yes, I do.
core part for her.
It is. And I think there are a lot of us who do feel that way. I certainly am a huge lover of Jane Austen's books, but also Anne of Green Gables was where it all began for me. I really did. I can tell you the day that I decided to be a writer was the day I watched the miniseries of
Megan
Anne from the
Feller
80s.
Fellows.
Yeah, gosh, it
Yes, love it.
Oh, so I come from a family where my grandmother named her house Avonlea, and so we've got a plaque that was on her house, Avonlea, and so there was a huge fascination right through the family. And my sister and I sat down. It was the summer holidays here. I was 14, and we watched this miniseries, and Sarah and I both just immediately fell in love with Gilbert, of course. But I also remember watching it and thinking, I am in love with Anne's drive to be a writer. And that just clicked in my head. And I thought, well, I've always got stories in my head. I thought everyone had stories in their head all the time. And I, the very next day, walked to the local newsagent near my grandmother's house where we were staying and bought a notebook and pen because this was 1987 and there was no laptop computers or anything, and started writing what I thought was sort of Australia's answer to Anne of Green Gables, which was just looking back on it, absolutely terrible. But it was I just had the bug to write, and that was it. And my sister was looking at me and she said, "Why are you wasting your summer holidays doing homework?" That's how she viewed what I was doing. And I said, "Homework? It's not like that. It's this fun, this escaping into another world." And so Anne was responsible for me doing all of this. And 37 years later, here we are having this conversation. But um, I love, and I'm really loving Bridgerton, and I'm absolutely obsessed with Jonathan Bailey from Bridgerton. And, my dream now would be Jonathan Bailey playing one of my characters on screen. That would just be
I'll take
absolute.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will take it. I can't tell you how I tried to change my accent because of how they spoke, and I would drop terms like bosom friends and kindred
Yeah.
spirits like
Yeah.
just randomly into conversations with my friends. Like,
Yeah.
it does it changes you. I just love it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you also brought in some humor to this. I mean, it's parts of it were dark, but you also mixed in 16-year-old girl humor into this. And I'm just going to go ahead and quote this because it made she's seeing her body for the first time coming out, and she says, "No, I do not look like a wellness fanatic. Exactly, more someone who has a passing acquaintance with the gym, the type where I use the treadmill occasionally and the coffee shop more often, mainly as a backdrop for Instagram." I just loved it. Like it was just so cute. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've got a lot of humor too in The Last Love Note, which obviously is a book about the loss of her husband based on my own experience, except for the bit where she falls in love with someone else, because that's not happened to me. But in that book, there's a surprising amount of humor for a book about grief. And I think that life is like that. It is light and shade. There are funny moments, even in the depths of despair, as Anne would say. There are these contradictions, and I think it helps. I did have a reader say to me once that something like that I pulled her into the depths of the grief, but never left her drowning there for too long, and lifted her back out with humor. And I think that's what I hope to achieve when I write these books, a mix of it all, because I think that's just what life is like.
Absolutely. Something I'm not as familiar with and just wanted to find out. You talk about this gap year, like it's something
Oh
that
yeah.
everybody, is that something very
That's
common
the
for
thing.
Australians to
Yeah.
take this gap year?
Yes, it wasn't when I finished school, but now it's almost I would say, and Megan can probably chime in too, that most school leavers here now take a gap year, which is just the year following their final year of high school. So when they're about 18,
Mhm.
before they go off to either university or to other training or education or start in a career, they have a year where they often will work for a while in, hospitality jobs and whatnot, and um, then they'll travel. And it's just this break. And now I've got friends saying they want to take an adult gap year as well, at any other point during life. And I love the idea of that. I don't know how practical it is though, because by the time you've reached the the point where you want to take an adult gap year, you've usually got a mortgage and kids and all of that. But um, yeah, I think it is actually something now that I look back on what it was like when I finished school, and there was just a few people that were doing. They'd often go to the UK from Australia, and they might volunteer. They might sort of be a teacher in a support teacher in a boarding school or something like that. That was really the only thing that people were doing, and not very many would. We just would go straight on to the next level. So I really like it. I think it's a great concept
Well,
after all
Allison's
that.
saying that it's like that in Canada too, and somebody's saying just more popular
Yeah.
after COVID. But
Yeah.
I thought about that. Could I take a gap year now? No, I mean that's a thing that kids can just pick up and go with. But it also was a very central part of the story. So I had to find that out. Um,
Yeah.
also, let's keep going because I have so much to cover. All right. The reader that talked about like not drowning, but not so long. So this grief happens throughout the novel, whether it be a push and pull from a friendship, a lost love. Is that something that you tap into personally? And
Yes.
like, is that something that you have to bring yourself back out of? Or because it sounds like you're very in the moment when you're writing.
Yeah. And as you know, in Pictures of You, there's also that crucial scene of Drew's mum passing away, and the two of them being there together through that. And the reason that's in the novel is that I lost my own mum while I was writing the book. And I use it as therapy, really. I'm sure I do. I wrote the entire last love note as therapy for myself and just to help other young widows make sense of what we're going through. So I think that whole thing of writing what you know is it applies just as much to the darker parts of life and the deeper things and the more difficult things as it does to the remembering what it was like to fall in love for the first time. And I think I can't now imagine writing a book where I don't go into topics like that in that depth. I just feel like it's it sounds weird to say, but it's my favorite part of the book to write. I get really immersed in it, and I do need to look after myself emotionally as well, because you can I mean I've sat there crying while writing at times, and the way I tend to get out of those emotions afterwards is via photography. It's really the only thing I ever do that I lose myself in entirely. And so that sort of rescues me once I've written a really intense scene.
Where did your love of photography begin?
Well, I feel like I've always been interested in it, but I really didn't take it up seriously until the pandemic. And we had some of the toughest lockdown rules in the world in Australia. And so there was a long period of time, not so much in Canberra where I am, but certainly in Melbourne, in Victoria, they had some of the really long lockdown periods. But we would be allowed out for an hour a day, and I did an iPhone photography course just as something to do. and started falling in love with the whole concept of losing myself by taking photos of plants or just anything on my walk, you know. And then I graduated to a proper big camera and particularly into macro photography, which is with a lens that helps you get right up close to little things like I would lie on the ground and take a photo of a dewdrop on a blade of grass, and I'd be there for, 2 hours, literally 2 hours sometimes. I would be in this little area in the middle of winter in Canberra with ice and frost and sunlight on the dewdrops and all of this. And I remember getting to the point where I could barely move anymore and thinking, oh, that's right, we're in a pandemic. I'd completely forgotten what was going on. It just was the most healthy escape that I could have possibly found. And it's the one thing that my husband didn't know about me. I feel like he never knew me as a photographer. It's this part of me that I have managed to build and develop since he died. And I think things like that are just so important. And you can see, of course, the love for it coming out all the way through the book. That and the coastline of Australia, which I feel like is a character in itself in the novel. Um, and so it's just it really is a creative passion. And I just, my wish is that everyone can find their thing like that. And it doesn't have to be photography or writing, but gardening, I don't know, hiking, anything that just takes you away completely. I think we all need something like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned the iPhone. Is yours a digital? Have you ever worked with film for your
What do you mean?
photography? Like real like camera.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, apart from in the 80s when I did have, like a Kodak little snap and,
Yeah.
I I've never taken photos and developed them in a dark room or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I loved that that was their language though, between
Yes.
Drew, they just had this their own photography language really, and it
Yeah.
was just so beautiful. And the fact that when she lost her memory, he said something like, just because she's not there, it doesn't take away her art, like inside of, I don't know the exact words,
Yeah,
but
no, that's right. And I really think because it's really just about perspective photography. That's really all it is. It's noticing the world and looking at it through a different way, looking at it a different way. And she's not going to have lost that. And um, I think it's a beautiful thing. It's just a beautiful hobby to have. In fact, I do have an Instagram account with my photography on it if anyone's interested. It's just Emma Gray photography. So if you want to have a look at my photos, I haven't posted there in a while. I've been sort of focusing on the writing side of it, but yes,
did
I
you get
do. I do
some time in
love
the
that they
US?
bonded over that.
Oh,
Pardon?
sorry, I was just going to ask, did you get some time in the US to shoot some
Um,
photography?
well, unfortunately, on the tour that I just did, I didn't get any time really. It was 13 different flights in 14 days, 8 states, just incredibly intense 2 weeks. And but the trip that I did about a year ago for the last Love Note, I took my two of my kids and we went a couple of weeks early. So we went to Yosemite and Grand Canyon and all over the place. And I took my camera that time and had an amazing fun time taking photos. It's just such a stunning country.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you got some time then, and hopefully you'll be back soon again
Yes.
for your next novel. We can't wait.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so we talked about linguistics, forensics, but there is this element of medical too with the dissociative amnesia. Was that
Mm.
something you came in with some knowledge, or is that something you had to do research on?
No, yeah, I had to research that. I had read a few, I remember reading an article a few years ago about a woman who had a traumatic experience. And then, like Evie, she woke up in her 17-year-old body. And I remember thinking way back then, that's a really interesting, thing to have happened.
Mhm.
How would that feel? What would have changed? And so I guess the idea for the book probably came from reading that article. And then I had to do some research into that and also into the whole gendered violence, coercive control stuff, because I felt really responsible for treating that topic carefully. And while I was writing it, of course, there was all the kerfuffle about It Ends With Us, the book and
Yes.
movie that had come out. And so I've said to my publishers, we need to be very careful how we market this book. I don't want there to be any confusion that this is a rom-com. It's a serious topic, and I want people to know that as they go in. And so I worked a lot with a woman here who's the deputy director of the National Women's Safety Alliance in Australia. And she read this book multiple times for me, and just because I was so wanting to be so careful about how I wrote about that topic.
It was definitely eye-opening and breath-catching in moments. Was it also one of those difficult topics to write?
Mm.
Because it seems, I mean, a lot of times you felt like you couldn't breathe.
Yeah, it really was. It was, and I personally haven't been in a situation where the relationship has been like that, but I have been the Brie character, like the best friend character in numerous relationships like that. And I have partly written this book because I think people don't understand why somebody doesn't leave a relationship, and don't realize that the moment that a woman decides to leave is the moment when she's most in danger. Um, so I kind of wanted to help, and I have had numerous people get in touch and say, thanks for writing it because their sister is in this relationship right now, and it's really helped them to see why it's so hard for her. So we're now, Hannah and I, my daughter and I, are now talking to various schools in Australia about potentially going and doing talks together on this topic, speaking to young girls in particular, but also I really want to, I'd love for young boys to read this book as well, and to have that role model of Drew beside Oliver, and see, what is acceptable and not acceptable in relationships. But we also had somebody approach us in Washington who is involved in a sorority in the US, and she said that they're partnering with a domestic violence charity this year, and so we may zoom in and talk to the sorority. And I think that's another whole group of young women who would benefit from hearing this message. And I think I said to Hannah, we've sort of promoted the book and done the typical book launchy stuff in the last few months, and now we're at this new phase where we can stand back and say, is there some way that we can now take this topic into schools and use it for good? Because I think having a topic like this covered in fiction is a way to help people access the topic and put themselves into the situation the character's in, and then have really good discussions about it. And then to have Hannah come in with her academic expertise as well, and she's young and like them and all of that, I think it could be quite beneficial for people.
Definitely. The book just opens the door, and then
Yeah.
yeah, and then you can have this opportunity to really connect and to open people's eyes, because I think so many of these little things you don't even realize what's happening until,
Mm.
much later. And so I hope that you do and can. And if there's anything I can help with on the US side, just let me know,
Thank
because I can, yeah, I think it is important to talk about.
Mm. you.
All right. Everybody start thinking about what question you want to ask, and where I'm going. Emma may not, but y'all know where I'm going. Rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I always
Okay.
get this, then I end up answering in a convoluted way and then never a rapid fire then. So I'll try to be quick.
Well, you've already warned us. A pantser, not a plotter. So
That's right.
you've got it now. All right. Favorite Australian beach?
Jarvis Bay, which is in the novel.
Favorite quirky word or phrase from Australia?
Oh my gosh, that is a hard one. I think what's funny is that we say yeah, nah, and nah, yeah, and they mean the opposite of what they sound like they mean. Listen out for Australians, you'll hear a lot of that. I don't think I
Okay, and
say it.
they
I don't think I say that myself, but now I've said it, I probably will catch myself saying it.
are you a night owl or an early bird?
I've become a night owl.
All right. What's your average words per day when writing?
That is a great question, and I wish I had an answer, but it's all over the place. This is a long answer. I've recently started doing sprints So I'll write 600 words and then I'll have an hour off. Then I'll write 600 words and an hour off. And I find that I can actually write way more words in a day in that way and also have a much more fun day where I don't feel guilty in the hour off.
You can
So
go
that's my
take
new.
blades. Yeah, take pictures of grass in the hours
Yes,
in
exactly,
between.
exactly.
You
Because, and
don't get
normally I
stuck
take
for
the
2 hours.
pictures of the grass. I'll be out there with the camera and I think I should be writing the book. But this just alleviates all of that guilt. It's great.
Awesome. Do you listen to music or need silence?
If I am listening to music, it has to be either just instrumental or I can listen to music in a foreign language. Like I've become obsessed with Korean dramas on TV, so I can listen to the soundtrack from a Korean drama because I don't understand what they're saying. But if there's words and lyrics that I can hear, I just keep getting snagged on the words.
You did mention one, I believe at the beginning of the novel, an instrumental, like a classical song, if I'm not
Oh yeah,
mistaken.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, do you prefer the workout gym or a coffee shop?
Coffee shop.
Same. This is a phrase you used. Are you a head down or a looking up person?
Well, think I think looking up, even though I'm saying head down, I'm lying on the ground taking photos, I am a looking up person. I do love to look around and look up and observe people.
When was the last time you jumped in the car ready for a chance?
Um, just to run off and go anywhere.
Yep.
Um, it was just saying to the kids, jump in the car, we're going to the coast, which is about 3 hours away.
Oh, nice. And then this one might be harder. And if it takes a longer answer, you have to think about it. Let me know. But what's the final scene you want to flash for you? Do you have one?
Um, it'll be about family. It'll be my family. I know that much. And I think it'll just be something simple from home, nothing flashy and extravagant or in a beautiful location around the world somewhere. It'll just be something in the home.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right, group, are y'all ready to ask your questions? I saw somebody raise their hand a minute ago. So if you have a question, go ahead and let me know. There is one. I'm going to go ahead and ask this because someone did put it in the box. Kelsey wanted to know if you had any personal experience with seeing the bioluminescence in nature. Like, how did you come up to put that in this book?
I so wish I did. It's the top of my bucket list, along with Prince Edward Island, of course. It, I've captured the aurora, which is another beautiful celestial experience multiple times now, just from close to Canberra where I live. And that is where I probably channeled the feelings that she has when she sees bioluminescence. But I have always been on the lookout for it and have never yet seen it. So it's absolutely why I love going to beaches, and I'm always sort of peeking at night to see if there's any sign of it. It's one of those notoriously difficult things to see because it's unpredictable. But if I've seen the aurora, hopefully I will see that next.
Well, definitely wish you luck on that. We did find out, I was at an event at Bookmarks called The Movable Feast, and there was a writer on writing about nighttime. And she said that they discovered in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina this bioluminescence as well. Like it was a phenomenon no one really knew about. So I was just like, oh, you mentioned the Blue Ridge. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So it was pretty cool. All right, Anissa, you have a question. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to go.
Hi, Albie.
Hey.
Hi, Emma.
Hi,
Um,
Anissa.
I'm curious, Emma, that since you said that you're a pantser, and since you said you don't know the ending of the book, along the way, has there been a character that changed the trajectory of the book just as they were talking to you, and it kind of changed you a different way?
Yeah, there've been characters I'd say, in all the books that I didn't even expect to pop up at all and be in the book. Often I'll start the book and think, so let's go with The Last Love Note, for example. I knew when I started writing it, I opened a document, chapter one, all I knew was this is a novel about a midlife widow falling in love again. That was it. I didn't know anything else.
Hmm.
And so I started writing, and I wrote the opening of that book is this rather chaotic scene where her young son walks out with a hand grenade that he's found in his father's study while she's decluttering the house, which is exactly what happened to me, my son. walked out. That scene is all from true life, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. It was quite exciting at the time. So I knew that, but I didn't expect there to be the rival love interest in her life. And often it'll be somebody like that who'll just pop up and I'll think, oh, who are you? Like, what are you doing in this story? And sometimes it is those characters. In the one that I'm writing now, there's a thing that has to be unraveled. And there's just this passing glance with these two young women in one of the scenes earlier on. And I realized near the end they are crucial to her figuring out what's happened. And they'd never occurred to me as being anything other than a couple of people walking past in a scene. You know, it's quite fascinating, the connections that seem to, they must be there on some subconscious level. And it's only later on, once you and usually while you're not anywhere near your computer, that the solution presents itself unexpectedly. And that's the bit I love about writing.
That's
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah.
I had hoped to get to see you in Charleston with my good friend Gervais, but it just didn't work out. So maybe when you come back for book 3, hopefully you'll be
Well,
somewhere close.
yes, well, I've already put in a request with the publisher and said, you know, it's almost criminal that we didn't even have 24 hours in Charleston.
Yeah,
I
one of
said,
the
it's
most
just
beautiful
so,
cities in the world,
so
isn't it?
beautiful. I said, please, next time we have to go back, but also can we sort of have it sort of near the beginning or near the end so I can have a couple of days there because it was just so
Yeah,
beautiful.
and Gervais, with having lived there her whole life, she knows where everything
It
is.
was
So
amazing. She took us into her childhood home with her
mhm.
parents, and oh, we had such a great time.
She's the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
thanks for
LB.
that question,
Thank you.
Lisa. All right, Mindy, you have a question? Go ahead.
I don't really have a
Hi,
specific
Dee.
question, but I had a COVID vaccine yesterday and I have been feeling not great all day, but I said I have to see Emma.
Yes, we ran into each other, didn't we?
Yes, we did on Long Island with Zibby. I know at that time I needed a lot of hugs and it seemed like the three of us needed hugs and
Yeah.
we talked about the last love note at the time.
Yes.
Emma came to Long Island, and she knows I missed her this time. She was in New York, but I hope again that she comes back. Just
Yeah.
her and her books are just filled with such the personality. You could feel it in the books, and when I met you, you're just what you see is what you get, LB.
I believe it. I believe it. Thank you so much, Mindy.
So wonderful.
I'm
So
sending you a hug.
yes, virtual
We did.
hugs.
We
Virtual
had a
hug
great
to
hug.
all.
We had a
Love
hug
those
in the
books.
we had a hug in the car park outside Barnes and Noble, didn't we?
Yes. And
Well, thank you for joining, Mindy. I appreciate it.
thank you for
Um,
doing this.
okay, I want to ask because you kind of dropped a little something that you're working on. Can you tell us anything, any tidbits on that, or is it too soon?
About the new book.
Yeah,
The structural edit is due on the 1st of April. I said to my agent,
April Fool's Day.
is that a real date or is that a joke? Unfortunately, it's real. Anyway, so that's a book that's been brewing for about 7 years, I realized. I When Jeff died, I remember ever since then, there's been a part of me that has wondered, what would this have been like if this had been the other way around? If it had been me who had died, what would have happened in the family to my kids? Where would they be living? Would he have repartnered? When he died, he was in the process of applying for a job in Ireland. Um, would he have moved there? Would they all be living in Ireland? You know, just at every turn, there was just a new potential outcome. So it's a book where I'm playing around with that idea, and I'm finding it really fascinating to write because it's making me think about my own life and the choices that I've made in the last 8 years, where we're living, where we've traveled, who we've met, all that sort of stuff. It's quite fascinating and mind-blowing when you start thinking about it.
Yeah, when that revolving door starts
Yeah.
going, it really can change
Yeah.
some thoughts. Absolutely. Okay, so we know, does it have a working title? Do you pick your titles or how does the
Yeah, I'm calling it Start at the End, and they seem to be sticking with it. So I think that's what it's going to be called. But we do sometimes change titles though. It's all very interesting, the title and the cover and all of those decisions, because they are very much, from the publisher's point of view, very much marketing decisions. So they'll get their marketing team involved, and their salespeople will look at it, and you know, they're the ones that have to go into the bookshops and say, buy this book. So if they don't like something, then it won't fly.
Those covers were very similar, though, I think, right? For yours, I mean, just
These
maybe
two,
some.
for the two, the
Well,
Australian
for
and the,
pictures of you, like the UK, I mean, not the UK, the US and the Australian.
yes. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was the same image, and the Australian one was sort of just a little bit brighter in tone, with a like a turquoise title, and that was because it came out in summer in Australia, so they thought it would look more like a summer book.
Mhm.
So even right down to that sort of decision,
The
it's quite
season. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
All right, Jessica, I'm going to give you last question. Go ahead.
Pressure's on. Aside from saying how much I've loved your books, Emma, I always like to hear from authors whose books I've enjoyed, what books they're enjoying reading.
Yes. Yes. Well, I've got one that I prepared earlier. This is actually a book written by my friend from Australia, but it's just this week, I think, come out in the US. It's called Tilda is Visible by Jane Tara. And it's a book about a woman in middle age who suffers from a fictional condition called invisibility. And I must say, I was at somebody's 40th birthday a week ago, and so were my daughters. And I met another woman there, and she's 55 and I'm 51. And at one point, we thought, let's go up to the bar and get a drink. And we stood there at that bar, and we thought, they're not noticing us. And meanwhile, all the younger people were getting served. And in the end, I said, I can fix this problem. I went outside and grabbed Hannah, 26, brought her in, put her next to us, and she was just immediately served. And so it's that thing that happens when you sort of hit 50-ish, and suddenly you seem to disappear from people's gaze. It's quite odd. It's in shops a lot. And anyway, so this book is very much about that condition and what she does about it. So have a look for that one. Another Aussie author.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for asking that, Jessica, and thank you for that answer. It's been such a wonderful night of discussion, and I should say morning or daytime for you. I want to thank you so much for coming here on your Monday, and please check out her Instagram. I'm going to be checking out that photography site as well for your Instagram, and just can't wait to hear the new news on your new book. But everyone out there, sure hope you'll follow me. I'll be the lover of books. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. And you can find reviews, recommendations, and of course, more author chats. Towards the end of this month, on March 23rd, we're going to be talking with author Elizabeth Dozelier for her debut, Eleanor of Avignon. I think this is going to be the perfect book for Women's History Month. And we always love supporting debut authors. Then towards the end of the month, actually the last day, March 31st, we're going to chat with Geneva Rose, and for her book, The Perfect Marriage. Now, this one came out a while ago, so it's kind of a back burner, but what's nice is it gets you ready for the follow-up called The Perfect Divorce, which is out April 15th. So it's going to be a fun conversation. If y'all have not heard her, you need to. She's hilarious. If you know of an author that you'd like to chat with, please let me know. I'll see if I can make it happen. But to stay up to date, you're going to check all those social media handles and just leave comments and let me know what y'all think. Readers, thank y'all so much for joining. Emma, thank you for giving us this powerful story. When most of us have a daily quota of our darkness was full, we appreciated you doing that. We appreciate you sharing the hand that was on the shoulder. I know that was a moment for you, and it was a moment for us. Thank you for sharing your safe and soft place to land. We loved getting to dive into this beautiful, haunting novel, but always knew we'd be swimming back to a secure, warm, and protected place. So from all of us, thank you for Pictures of You.
Oh, thank you. That is absolutely poetic and beautiful. Thank you so
They're
much.
your words. You're
no,
poetic.
but it's but it's just been so lovely to chat with you all. I really appreciate your support, and it's just been delightful. What a lovely way to spend Monday lunchtime here.
Hey, anytime, check in with us. But we absolutely adore you and can't wait to support you in your next novel. And lots of us will be looking out for you to come back to the US
Looking
with your
forward to it.
camera.
Yes.
Good night, everybody. Y'all have a good one.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.